Hi, and welcome back to the Forgive Yourself podcast. I'm your host, Brenda Reese. Today, we are continuing our three-part series called When Father's Day Feels Complicated, a three-part series on the father wound, forgiveness, and healing. And today is episode 2. But, I want to talk about in the first episode, we talked about what Father's Day can bring up when the relationship with your father is complicated. We explored the father you had versus the father you needed, the grief of what wasn't received, and the truth that forgiveness is not about excusing what hurt. It is about your freedom. Now, today we're going to go a layer deeper. We're going to talk about the father wound and how it may shape the way you love, trust, and choose. Because the father wound is not just about your father. It is about the beliefs you formed about yourself when you didn't feel fully seen, heard, safe, protected, chosen, or emotionally met. And those beliefs can quietly follow us into our adult relationships, our boundaries, our self-worth, and our ability to trust ourselves. So what is the father wound? The father wound is the emotional imprint left by the relationship you had with your father or father figure. It may come from a father who was absent, critical, controlling, unpredictable, emotionally unavailable, distracted, addicted, angry, overwhelmed, or simply unable to connect with you in the way your heart needed. And it can also come from a father who loved you, provided for you, and did the best he could, but still could not meet you emotionally. That's important because sometimes we dismiss our own pain by saying, oh, it wasn't that bad. He provided. Other people had it worse. I should just be grateful. There's a place for that. Yet, emotional wounds are not only created by what happened. They can be created by what was missing, the comfort that didn't come, the approval you longed for, the protection that wasn't there, the apology you never received, the interest he didn't show, or the way he didn't know how to ask, how are you really? And as children, we often make those missing pieces mean something about us. We may begin to believe, I'm not important. I'm too much. I have to earn love. I have to be perfect. I have to take care of myself. I'm not worth choosing. Those were pretty much all of mine. I don't know. How about you, right? That's the deeper wound. Not only what happened, but what you came to believe about yourself because of what happened. So let's take a look at how a father wound shapes the way you love. Now, if you didn't feel fully seen, chosen, protected, or emotionally met by your father, you may find yourself drawn to people who recreate that familiar ache. Not because you want to suffer, not because you're broken, because familiar can feel powerful. Familiar feels like chemistry. Familiar feels like longing. Familiar can feel like if I can finally get this person to choose me, maybe I'll be enough. And this is where we can begin to repeat old patterns. We may overgive, may overexplain. We may forgive too quickly. I did that. Isn't that funny? I teach forgiveness. And I realized that about my pattern was I was always trying to get to comfort, right? To safety. And so I would I would come to forgiveness too quickly, and then I'd be really resentful. And the only way I found that out is because I'd blow up because I was so angry. Yeah. So I don't want you to do that. So we are going to help with that. Now, we also may see potential instead of reality. That was a big one in all of my romantic relationships based on this father wound. And I remember, I think I've said this before, pardon my French on this one, but I remember hearing one gal say, Brenda, any relationship based on potential is fucked. And I didn't really understand it at the time. And it took me a little while, but not long before, I wasn't seeing the reality. Okay. We may confuse inconsistency with depth. We may confuse intensity with intimacy. That was mine too, like the bad boy, you know? We may confuse being needed with being loved. And we may accept crumbs and call it connection. And for many high achieving women, this can be especially painful because the same strength that helps you succeed in life can become the very thing that keeps you stuck in love. You may think, if I just understand him more, if I just communicate better, if I just give him more time, if I just love him enough. I did that in my last marriage. If I could just be better, if I could just do better, if I could just dress differently or weigh less or have different hair, or if I could just do something different. I was trying to change myself to please him. And when he didn't love himself, there was no way that anything I do was ever going to please him, right? Because I want you to think, or remember actually, that love that requires you to abandon yourself is not the love your soul is asking for. Took me a long time to figure that out. And the question is not what's wrong with me. I was always asking that. The better question is, what part of me is still trying to earn love from someone who feels familiar? Now that question opens the door to compassion. So I mentioned that the father wound can also shape the way we trust. So if your father was inconsistent, you may have learned to scan for signs that something was wrong, right? If he was critical, you may have learned to doubt yourself. If he was controlling, you may have learned that your voice wasn't safe. If he was absent, you may have learned not to rely on anyone. And sometimes it can be, if he was absent, sometimes we can overly rely on other people too. I want to say that. It's not that it can go either way. It's a pendulum swing, one end or the other. There's no middle ground. Either not going to rely on anyone, and sometimes that's what we had to do, or we overly rely on people. If he was emotionally unavailable, you may have learned that your feelings were too much. It's a lot of my clients told they were too much, and they weren't. And later, this shows up as self-doubt. You may know something doesn't feel right, but talk yourself right out of it. Have you ever done that? Yep, I have. You may sense that someone's words and actions don't match, but you tell yourself you're overreacting. Oh my God, I've done that. You may look outside yourself for permission. Validation, right? You may give someone else's opinion more authority than your own inner knowing. That was me for the longest time. That's why self-trust is such an important part of healing. And that's why you hear that from me a lot. Self-trust is so important to even be able to get to self-forgiveness. Because when our truth was dismissed, minimized, criticized, or ignored, we learn to separate from ourselves. And we start to ask, what will keep the peace? What will make me acceptable? What will make them stay? We would do anything so that it wouldn't abandon us, right? And we ask all those instead of, what do I feel? What do I need? What is actually true for me? Healing begins when you can start asking those questions. Remember, it's not perfect. It's not all at once. It's a gentle process because you're learning to be honest with yourself just one moment at a time. Now, the father wound can also shape the way you choose. Who you choose, what you tolerate, how long you stay, how much you explain, how much you give, how often you silence yourself to keep connection. Sometimes we choose from the wound before we choose from our worth. We choose what feels familiar instead of what feels healthy. We choose being needed instead of being cherished. We choose potential instead of presence. We choose peacekeeping instead of truth, and we choose being chosen over choosing ourselves. And again, this is not about shaming ourselves, right? I have so many of my clients say that they got into relationships because the person liked them and was paying attention to them. And they didn't even really know if they really liked them at first, but they chose that person because that person chose them. Yeah. It's that old survival strategy to feel loved and cherished and seen and needed. That's all. Now, again, this is not about shaming ourselves. This is about how we learn to survive. Because many of these choices we made started out as protection. If you learned that love had to be earned, of course you learned to prove yourself. If you learned that needs were too much, of course you learned to minimize them. And if you learned that approval meant safety, of course you learned to seek it. And if you learned that connection could disappear, of course you learned to hold on tightly. So the healing question becomes, am I choosing from my wound or am I choosing from my worth? That question can change everything because forgiveness allows you to see the pattern without attacking yourself. It says, I can understand why I chose what I chose. I can forgive myself for what I didn't know. And I can choose differently now. Right? Now we have choice. Choosing from your worth does not mean you never feel the old pull. Okay. Have you ever heard that, our patterns and our beliefs will stay with us? We just learn how to manage them better. We learn how to be aware of them. And the way we do that is we pause. We learn to pause instead of react. We take a breath. If we start to feel something, we learn to pause. Okay. And in that pause, we can then notice that inconsistency feels familiar. We notice whether someone's behavior matches their words. It means you stop trying to be chosen by people who make you question your value. It means you listen when your body says something doesn't feel right. We get those nudges and we override them. It means you stop calling your needs too much simply because someone else does not have the capacity to meet them. And it means you stop shrinking yourself to keep connection. And you stop proving your value to someone who cannot see it. And maybe, most of all, it means you begin to say, I do not have to abandon myself to be loved. I do not have to earn consistency. I do not have to chase what is meant to meet me. I can choose what honors my peace. I can learn to trust myself. That is healing. That's not perfection. It's not about never repeating this old pattern again. It's about noticing it sooner. It's about pausing sooner. It's about telling yourself the truth sooner, which means you choose yourself sooner. You know that I love reflection questions. And so I'm going to offer you a few reflection questions before we close today. And what you can do is find a link in the show notes for a download of these, or you can go to the website under resources. We've got quite a few things there for you. But right now, you can just simply listen and let these questions kind of move through your heart. Question 1. When I think about my father or father figure, what did I most want from him? Approval, protection, attention, affection, encouragement, consistency, emotional safety, to be seen maybe, or to be chosen, or whatever comes to mind for you. What did you want most from him? Now, question 2 is, what did I begin to believe about myself when I didn't receive that in the way I needed? I just want you to really feel into that. What did you believe about yourself? And question 3 is, where does that belief still show up in the way that I love? Here's some examples. Do I overgive? Do I chase unavailable people? Do I accept less than I need? Do I try to prove my worth? Do I try to be the good friend, the good wife, the good girlfriend, the good girl? Do I put their needs before mine? So those are some examples. Question 4, where does that belief still show up in the way I trust myself? Some examples. Do I second guess myself? Am I always looking for permission? Do I minimize my feelings? Do I ignore my body's signals? Okay. Question 5, where does that belief still show up in the way that I choose? Okay. Some things to think about. Do I say yes when I mean no? Do I stay too long? Do I choose peacekeeping over truth? Do I choose being chosen over choosing myself? And the last question, number 6, is what would it look like in one small way to choose from my worth instead of my wound? Let it be small. Small choices build self-trust. So as we close today, I want to remind you that the father wound is not just about your father. It is about the beliefs you formed about yourself when you didn't feel fully seen, safe, protected, chosen, or emotionally met. And if those beliefs have shaped the way you love, trust, or choose, that does not mean something is wrong with you. It means something happened that your heart learned to adapt to. It means a younger part of you found ways to survive, connect, cope, and keep hoping. And now as the adult you get to bring compassion to those places. You get to see the pattern without shaming yourself. You get to forgive yourself for what you didn't know. You get to stop making someone else's limitations the measure of your worth. And you get to begin choosing differently, not perfectly. This is not about doing it all at once, even though us high achieving women like to do that. This is about being gentle and being honest. One choice at a time. Now, in the next episode, it'll be our 3rd one, and we'll move into the healing part of this series. We're going to talk about healing the father wound, becoming the safe place you needed. We'll explore how to give yourself what you didn't receive, how to forgive yourself for the roles you played to be loved, and how to begin rebuilding self-trust from the inside out. Thank you so much for being with me today. I really cherish our time together. And if this episode spoke to you, share it with someone who may need a gentle reminder that they are not alone and there is healing for that father wound. And if you're noticing, any of these old patterns or people-pleasing codependency or the ache of not feeling chosen, if those are still showing up in your life and you'd like some support, take a look at my website, Brenda Reese, REISS coaching.com. We have blogs and resources there for you to begin your journey of discovery and coming back home to yourself. Meanwhile, until next time, remember that you matter. Take care. Thank you so much for listening today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did enjoy it, would you do me a favor and share this episode and then follow us on your favorite podcast app so you don't miss one episode of the Forgive Yourself podcast, where every Friday you will get tips, tools, and stories so that you can turn your pain into peace. Take care.